Tell me honestly, the message on the screen read, "Do you think I'm pretty?" It was only 7 words, but they carried the weight of years no balance sheet could measure. And in that quiet instant, Ethan Walker realized that the most powerful woman in the room might also be the loneliest. The soft hum of cooling fans filled the executive office, while late afternoon sunlight spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Beyond the glass, the skyline shimmered with confidence, steel, ambition, and billion-dollar dreams. Inside, everything was silent except for the steady clicking beneath Ethan's fingertips as he carefully restored the encrypted drive of a laptop everyone else had declared beyond saving. He wasn't a celebrity engineer or the owner of a flashy tech company. He was simply a single dad who spent his weekdays repairing computers and his evenings helping his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, finish homework at their small townhouse on the edge of Naperville. His work shirt was clean but worn at the cuffs, and the old leather toolbox beside his chair had traveled with him through years of honest work. Ethan believed machines deserve patience because people often forgot to give each other any. He never rushed. He never pried. He fixed what was broken and quietly moved on. That reputation had somehow reached Hayes Dynamics, one of America's fastest-growing artificial intelligence companies, after an unexpected system failure locked the CEO out of years of personal files. 3 elite cybersecurity firms had already tried and failed. Ethan had been called only because someone remembered hearing about a local technician who cared more about recovering memories than collecting invoices. He had accepted the job without knowing whose office he would enter. Victoria Hayes stood several feet away, speaking softly with her chief of staff, her tailored navy suit as flawless as her public reputation. Every employee who passed the open doorway lowered their voice without being asked. She carried herself with calm authority, never wasting words, never showing uncertainty. Financial magazines called her unstoppable. Business channels called her America's youngest self-made billionaire. Ethan simply knew her as the owner of the computer sitting in front of him. After nearly 2 hours of careful reconstruction, the operating system finally came alive. A small notification appeared, then another. Before Ethan could minimize the recovery log, a forgotten photo window reopened automatically from the previous session. A simple portrait filled the display. Victoria wasn't standing on a stage or addressing shareholders. She wore no designer jacket, no confident smile. Her hair rested naturally over one shoulder as she looked straight into the camera with uncertain eyes. Beneath the picture was a draft saved but never sent. 7 quiet words. "Do you think I'm pretty?" Ethan's fingers froze above the keyboard for only a heartbeat. Without reading another line, he gently closed the window, secured the recovered files, and resumed the final diagnostics as though nothing had happened. Some secrets weren't meant to be discovered. Some wounds deserve privacy. And sometimes the strongest thing a person could do was pretend they had seen nothing at all. Behind him, Victoria turned toward the desk, completely unaware that the question she had hidden from the entire world had already found its way into the hands of the one man who would never use it against her. Victoria Hayes crossed the room with measured steps, the polished hardwood floor barely echoing beneath her heels. She did not ask whether the repair had succeeded. Instead, her eyes went straight to the laptop resting quietly on the conference table, as if she were approaching something far more fragile than expensive hardware. Ethan disconnected the recovery drive, carefully wrapped the cable, and closed his toolbox before sliding the computer toward her. "Everything has been restored," he said calmly. "I also updated the security settings that caused the system conflict. You should not run into the same issue again." Victoria opened the screen slowly. The familiar desktop appeared exactly as she had left it. Every folder was in place. Every document opened without hesitation. She clicked through several projects, then a family archive, then an encrypted journal folder. Nothing was missing. Nothing had been rearranged. She glanced up at Ethan for the first time since entering the room. "You recovered everything?" she asked quietly. "Everything that could be recovered," he answered. "Some corrupted temporary files were beyond repair, but your personal data is safe." She studied his face longer than necessary. Most people standing inside her office try to impress her. Some spoke too much. Others smiled too often. Ethan did neither. He simply waited, hands resting lightly on the handle of his worn toolbox. The silence lingered until her chief of staff finally smiled with visible relief. That is incredible. 3 companies spend days trying to do this. Ethan nodded politely. Sometimes computers only need someone willing to slow down. The words sounded simple, yet something about them settled into the room like warm afternoon light. Victoria dismissed her staff with a small gesture. Within moments, the office doors closed softly, leaving only the 2 of them surrounded by the quiet hum of servers hidden behind elegant walls. She looked back at the screen. Her heartbeat remained steady, but a question quietly refused to leave her mind. Had he seen it? Had that forgotten window appeared before he restored the session? She knew exactly what had been open the last time she used the laptop alone late one rainy evening. She remembered typing the words, staring at them for several minutes, then saving the draft without understanding why. It had been a private moment she had never intended another person to witness. Finally, she broke the silence. Did anything unusual appear during the recovery? Ethan looked at her with the same calm expression he had worn since arriving. Only the normal recovery prompts, he replied. Automatic windows sometimes reopen after a system crash. I closed anything that was not related to the repair. Victoria searched his eyes for even the smallest trace of curiosity. She found none. No guardesmide, no heathen amusement, no sympathy she had not requested, only quiet respect. For reasons she could not explain, that unsettled her more than embarrassment ever could. She had spent years learning how to read investors, competitors, journalists, and politicians. Yet this ordinary single father remained impossible to read. Ethan picked up his toolbox. If everything looks good, I will be on my way. My daughter gets out of school in about 40 minutes. Victoria blinked. You pick her up yourself every day? Every day, he answered with a faint smile. She says the ride home is the best part because that is when she gets to tell me everything that happened. Something softened across Victoria's expression before she caught herself. She nodded once. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Ethan simply inclined his head and walked toward the door without asking for a photograph, an autograph, another contract, or even recognition. After the door closed behind him, Victoria remained standing beside the laptop, staring at the reflection of her own face in the darkened edge of the screen. For the first time in years, she found herself wondering not whether someone admired her success, but whether a man who had every opportunity to expose her deepest insecurity had chosen silence simply because kindness mattered more than curiosity. The following morning arrived beneath a pale September sky, and Hayes dynamics awakened long before sunrise. The headquarters pulsed with its usual rhythm as security badges chimed at every entrance. Coffee machines hissed across executive lounges, and giant digital displays tracked stock prices climbing another fraction of a percent. Employees hurried through the glass atrium with laptops tucked beneath their arms, each person moving with purpose, each convinced they understood the woman leading the company. They admired her discipline. They respected her intelligence. Some even feared her impossible standards. But none of them truly knew Victoria Hayes. They knew the public figure who appeared on magazine covers and financial news programs. They knew the executive who negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions without raising her voice. They knew the visionary who could predict technology trends years before her competitors. What they did not know was that every evening, after the final meeting ended and the elevators grew quiet, she often remained alone in her office, staring through the same floor-to-ceiling windows, wondering why success had filled every room in her life except the one inside her heart. Her assistant, Grace Donovan, knocked softly before entering with a morning schedule. You have the investors at 9, the university partnership meeting at 11, and dinner with the board tonight. Victoria nadidapsen mindedli. Move the dinner to next week. Grace hesitated. That will surprise them. Let them be surprised. Grace gathered the remaining folders, but paused before reaching the door. May I ask you something? Victoria looked up. Of course. That technician yesterday. Mr. Walker. Victoria remained silent. Grace smiled gently. You have never canceled an evening meeting after hiring someone to repair a computer. A faint smile almost appeared before disappearing again. Perhaps I am simply tired. Grace accepted the answer, even though she did not believe it. Once alone, Victoria opened her laptop once more. Everything worked perfectly, faster than before, cleaner than before. She clicked through folders until her cursor hovered over the private draft she had forgotten to delete. She read the question again. Do you think I am pretty? It sounded childish now, almost embarrassing, yet she remembered exactly why she had written it. 7 years earlier, shortly after becoming chief executive officer at only 28, a television commentator had praised her company before joking that investors cared more about her appearance than her engineering talent. Newspapers repeated the remark. Social media multiplied it. Compliments and insults blended together until she no longer knew whether anyone actually saw her. Since then, every mirror had become another boardroom, another place where she felt quietly evaluated instead of understood. She closed the file without deleting it. Across town, Ethan parked outside Lincoln Elementary 5 minutes before dismissal, exactly as he did every afternoon. His aging pickup truck stood between luxury sport utility vehicles and polished electric sedans without drawing much attention. Lily came running across the sidewalk, carrying a backpack nearly as large as she was, her blonde ponytail bouncing with every step. She climbed into the passenger seat, wearing the biggest smile in the parking lot. "Guess what happened today?" she asked before fastening her seatbelt. Ethan laughed softly. "That depends. Is this a good guess what happened or a bad one?" "The best one." She proudly held up a drawing covered in bright crayons. It showed a tiny house beneath a huge blue sky with 2 smiling stick figures holding hands. Ethan admired it as though it belonged in an art museum. "Looks like home." Lily nodded. "Mrs. Parker asked us what makes people rich. Everybody said money. I said having someone who always comes to pick you up." Ethan looked out the windshield for a moment before quietly starting the engine. He did not notice the sleek black sedan parked across the street. Behind its lightly tinted window, Victoria Hayes had come to visit the elementary school for a scholarship announcement scheduled later that afternoon. By pure coincidence, she had witnessed a little girl running into her father's arms with absolute trust, and for reasons she could not explain, she found herself unable to look away. The scholarship ceremony concluded beneath rows of blue and silver balloons as parents gathered with paper cups of coffee and children chased one another across the freshly cut grass. Victoria accepted polite applause after announcing a new technology grant for the school district, yet her attention drifted again and again toward the parking lot where Ethan and Lily had disappeared nearly an hour earlier. She had built companies by trusting data instead of emotion. But no spreadsheet could explain why a simple conversation between a father and his daughter lingered in her thoughts longer than multi-million-dollar negotiations. As her security team escorted her toward the waiting sedan, Grace noticed the distant look in her eyes. "Everything all right?" she asked gently. Victoria nodded, although the answer felt incomplete. "Tell me something, Grace. When was the last time you saw someone genuinely happy over something so ordinary?" Grace smiled. "Probably this afternoon." She paused before adding, "Money solves many problems, Victoria. Loneliness is usually not one of them." The words settled quietly between them during the drive back to headquarters. Meanwhile, Ethan and Lily stopped at their favorite neighborhood grocery store. It was nothing special, just a family-owned market with faded brick walls, cheerful cashiers, and the comforting smell of fresh bread drifting from the bakery in the corner. Lily insisted on picking apples herself, carefully comparing each one before placing it into the cart. "This one looks lonely," she said, holding up a slightly imperfect apple with a tiny bruise. Ethan laughed softly. "Then we should probably bring it home." An elderly employee overheard the conversation and smiled warmly. "Your daughter always picks the ones everyone else leaves behind." Lily shrugged as though the answer were obvious. "Everybody deserves to be chosen." Ethan looked at her with quiet pride, wondering how someone so young had already learned lessons many adults never discovered. Back at Hayes Dynamics, Victoria unlocked her office after another series of meetings that had stretched well into the evening. The building had grown unusually quiet. Most employees had gone home, leaving only the distant hum of climate control systems and the soft glow of city lights spilling through the windows. She opened the laptop once more, not because she needed to work, but because she wanted to understand what Ethan had done differently. Everything had been organized with remarkable care. Temporary files had been removed. Security vulnerabilities had been repaired. Even forgotten folders had been placed in illogical archives without disturbing a single personal document. Then she noticed something she had missed before. A small text file rested inside the maintenance report folder. Her heartbeat quickened for an instant before she opened it. Inside were only 3 short sentences. System restored successfully. Private files were not reviewed. Thank you for trusting me with your computer. Nothing more. No mention of the photograph. No mention of the question she had written. No hidden message suggesting curiosity or pity. She leaned back slowly, staring at those simple words, as though they carried a meaning far greater than technical documentation. Most people protected privacy because contracts required it. Ethan had protected hers because his character required it. She closed the file and folded her hands together, feeling an unfamiliar mixture of relief and regret. Relief that her secret remained untouched. Regret that she had assumed a stranger might exploit her vulnerability simply because so many others had done exactly that before. Outside, the first autumn rain began tapping gently against the glass, each drop reflecting the lights of the city below. Victoria stood beside the window, watching traffic move through the evening while the words from Lily echoed inside her memory. Having someone who always comes to pick you up. She whispered the sentence once beneath her breath, then glanced toward the maintenance report again. For the first time in many years, she found herself wondering whether the strongest people were not the ones who built empires, but the ones who quietly kept their promises every single day. The rain continued through the night, leaving the streets washed clean beneath the soft glow of neighborhood streetlights. By sunrise, cool autumn air drifted through Ethan Walker's open kitchen window, while the aroma of fresh pancakes filled the small townhouse. Lily sat at the counter, swinging her feet beneath the stool, carefully arranging blueberries into the shape of a smiling face before pouring maple syrup over the plate. Ethan laughed quietly as he packed her lunch. That smile is about to disappear. Lily giggled. That is because delicious things never stay pretty for long. They shared breakfast without television, without phones, and without rushing through the conversation. Lily talked about a science project, a spelling quiz, and the class hamster that somehow escaped its cage again. Ethan listened to every word as though each story deserved its own chapter. Before leaving, Lily slipped a folded note into his jacket pocket. "Do not read it until later," she whispered with a mysterious smile. Ethan nodded. "I will follow instructions." Across the city, Victoria Hayes arrived at headquarters before most employees had reached the parking garage. She carried a fresh cup of coffee into her office, but instead of opening financial reports, she found herself staring once again at the maintenance report Ethan had left behind. 3 simple sentences. Honest, respectful, complete. She realized something unusual. In a world where nearly everyone wanted something from her, Ethan had walked away wanting nothing at all. Grace entered carrying the morning briefing. "The board approved your visit to the Innovation Center this afternoon," she said. "There will also be several local technology vendors demonstrating their work." Victoria looked up almost immediately. "Do we have the participant list?" Grace handed her a folder. Victoria scanned the names without much interest until one stopped her eyes. Walker Technology Services. She closed the folder before Grace noticed her reaction. "I think I will attend the demonstrations personally." Grace smiled knowingly but asked no questions. That afternoon, the Innovation Center buzzed with conversations between engineers, educators, entrepreneurs, and students exploring new ideas. Folding tables displayed prototypes, educational software, robotics kits, and computer hardware. Ethan stood behind a modest booth with neatly organized repair tools and a small monitor showing examples of secure data recovery. His display attracted fewer visitors than the larger companies with bright banners and expensive marketing materials, yet every person who stopped received his full attention. He explained complicated technical problems using simple language, making everyone feel welcome regardless of their experience. Victoria entered quietly with only Grace accompanying her, choosing to leave the rest of her security team outside to avoid unnecessary attention. She observed Ethan from across the room before approaching. He was helping an elderly school librarian recover photographs from an aging laptop that held decades of memories. "Your pictures are safe," Ethan assured her warmly. "Sometimes old computers just need someone who refuses to give up on them." The librarian smiled with visible relief. "You saved my grandchildren's birthdays." Ethan shrugged gently. The memories were already there. I only helped uncover them. Victoria remained still after hearing those words. Somehow they sounded larger than computers. When the librarian walked away happily, Ethan finally noticed Victoria standing nearby. There was no surprise in his expression, only polite professionalism. "Good afternoon," he said with an easy smile. "Is your laptop still behaving itself?" Victoria returned the smile, almost cautiously. "Perfectly." Neither mentioned the private draft. Neither mentioned the maintenance report. They spoke only about software updates, community education programs, and the importance of teaching children digital responsibility. The conversation remained simple, yet every passing minute quietly dismantled another wall Victoria had spent years building around herself. As she prepared to leave, Ethan reached into his jacket pocket, looking for a business card. Instead, he unfolded Lily's note by mistake. Written in large, uneven letters were the words, "Daddy, thank you for always fixing my bad days, even when they are not computers." Ethan smiled to himself before carefully folding the note again, never noticing that Victoria had read every single word. The Innovation Center slowly emptied as the afternoon sunlight stretched across the polished concrete floor, leaving long golden reflections beneath rows of folding tables. Exhibitors packed away banners and demonstration equipment, while volunteers gathered extension cords and stacked empty chairs. Ethan carefully wrapped each cable before placing it inside his weathered toolbox, taking the same care with inexpensive tools that others reserve for priceless possessions. Across the room, Victoria lingered longer than her schedule allowed, pretending to review educational displays while her attention quietly returned to the man who had somehow made ordinary kindness feel extraordinary. Grace approached with her tablet. "Your driver is waiting. The board has already called twice." Victoria nodded without moving. "Tell them I will be 15 minutes late." Grace raised an eyebrow. 15. Victoria smiled fondly. "Perhaps 20. Grace understood enough not to ask another question. As Ethan finished packing, he noticed a small robotics kit sitting alone beneath the corner of a nearby table. The event volunteers had already begun turning off the lights in that section of the hall. He picked up the unopened box and looked around before spotting a nervous middle school student searching beneath several displays. "Excuse me," Ethan called gently. The boy turned with worried eyes. "Are you looking for this?" Relief spread across the child's face almost instantly. "I thought I lost it. My team spent months building enough points to win that prize." Ethan handed him the box with an easy smile. "Then I think it belongs with you." The boy thanked him several times before hurrying toward his waiting parents. Victoria had watched the entire exchange from only a few yards away. Ethan could easily have walked past without noticing. He could have handed the box to event staff and continued home. Instead, he had chosen the slower path simply because it was the right one. It reminded her of the maintenance report. It reminded her of the private file he never mentioned. It reminded her that character revealed itself most clearly when no audience was watching. She finally stepped forward. "Mr. Walker." Ethan turned politely. "Good afternoon again." Victoria glanced toward the nearly empty hall. "Would you have a few minutes for coffee?" Ethan hesitated just long enough to check the time on his watch. "I appreciate the invitation, but I cannot today." She seemed slightly surprised. "Another appointment?" He smiled warmly. "A much more important one. Lily finishes her after-school art club in 25 minutes, and she's been talking about showing me her painting all week." There was not a trace of apology in his voice, only quiet certainty about where he belonged. Victoria nodded with genuine understanding. She is fortunate. Ethan shook his head gently. I think I am the fortunate one. The word stayed with Victoria as she watched him lift his toolbox and walk toward the parking lot. He did not know he had just declined coffee with one of the wealthiest women in America without hesitation or calculation. He had simply chosen his daughter first, exactly as he always did. Later that evening, Ethan and Lily sat together on the back porch, sharing hot apple cider beneath a blanket as cool autumn air drifted through the neighborhood. Lily proudly held up her watercolor painting of a little house beneath a wide blue sky. Above it she had written in careful letters, "Home is where people keep coming back." Ethan smiled, feeling his heart grow lighter. At that very moment, several miles away, Victoria stood alone in her penthouse apartment, overlooking the glittering city lights. Expensive artwork covered the walls. Elegant furniture filled every room. Yet the silence felt larger than the entire home. She found herself remembering not the impressive speeches she had heard that day, but a father who measured his schedule by school pickup times instead of board meetings. And for the first time, she quietly wondered whether the richest life might not be the one everyone admired, but the one someone could not wait to come home to. Several days passed with quiet consistency, and life settled into familiar rhythms that somehow carried new meaning for both of them. Ethan continued repairing computers across the western suburbs of Chicago, driving from one customer to another with his old pickup truck, never charging more than he believed was fair and never treating a small repair as less important than an expensive one. Victoria returned to board meetings, investor calls, and interviews that praised her leadership while asking the same predictable questions about quarterly growth and market expansion. Yet beneath every polished answer, another conversation continued silently inside her heart. She found herself comparing every ambitious executive she met to the quiet technician who had left her office asking for nothing except enough time to pick up his daughter from school. One crisp Saturday morning, Hayes Dynamics hosted a community technology fair for local families, offering free coding workshops, robotics demonstrations, and scholarship information. Grace quietly added one additional invitation to the guest list without making a public announcement. Walker Technology Services received a request to host a hands-on computer repair table for children interested in engineering. Ethan accepted immediately, mostly because Lily loved science fairs more than amusement parks. The downtown campus filled with laughter instead of business conversations. Children carried miniature robots across wide marble hallways, while parents wandered between exhibits, holding paper cups of hot chocolate. Lily raced ahead wearing a bright yellow sweatshirt, stopping every few feet whenever something sparked her curiosity. Ethan remained only a few steps behind, letting her explore while never allowing her to feel alone. Victoria watched unnoticed from the second-floor balcony before finally walking downstairs. She wore simple jeans, white sneakers, and a light blue sweater instead of her usual executive wardrobe. Without the formal suit and carefully rehearsed public image, she appeared less like the leader of a global company and more like an ordinary woman hoping not to be recognized. Lily noticed her first. "Daddy," she whispered excitedly. "That is the lady with the computer." Ethan smiled politely as Victoria approached. "Good morning." "Good morning," Victoria replied. "I hope I am not interrupting." "Not at all," Ethan answered. Lily stepped forward before either adult could continue. "I like your sweater. It matches the sky." Victoria laughed softly, surprised by the unexpected compliment. "Thank you. I like your honesty." Lily grinned proudly. "Daddy says honesty is easier because you never have to remember what you said yesterday." Victoria looked toward Ethan, who shrugged with an embarrassed smile. "She remembers everything." The three of them wandered through several exhibits together, talking about simple things instead of billion-dollar companies or difficult careers. Lily eagerly demonstrated a tiny robot she had programmed to follow colored lines across the floor. When the little machine reached the finish, she clapped louder than anyone else. Victoria applauded just as enthusiastically, earning a bright smile from the little girl. They paused near a window overlooking the Chicago River where colorful autumn leaves drifted across the water below. Lily looked up at Victoria with complete innocence. Can I ask you something? Victoria nodded warmly. Of course. Lily tilted her head. Why do grown-ups always worry about looking perfect? The question caught Victoria completely by surprise. She searched for an answer, but found only silence. Before the moment became uncomfortable, Lily continued with the simple confidence that only children possess. Daddy says beautiful people usually do not spend much time asking if they are beautiful, because they are too busy helping someone else feel important. Time seemed to stand still. The cheerful sounds of the technology fair faded into the distance as Victoria stared quietly at the little girl. Ethan had never told Lily about the forgotten draft on the laptop. He never would have. Yet somehow those innocent words reached the deepest corner of Victoria's heart, gently touching the same hidden question she had carried for years. She smiled, but this time there was unmistakable warmth behind it, because for the first time she realized that healing sometimes arrived not through grand speeches or extraordinary success, but through the simple wisdom shared around an ordinary family that never even knew it was changing someone else's life. The warmth of the community event lingered long after everyone returned to their ordinary routines, but Monday morning brought an entirely different atmosphere inside Hayes Dynamics. Before the first executive meeting could begin, warning alerts flashed across monitors throughout the headquarters. Employees stopped mid-conversation as secure login systems slowed unexpectedly. Engineers hurried between conference rooms carrying laptops while information technology specialists gathered around large display screens filled with scrolling diagnostic reports. No customer information had been lost, but critical internal systems responsible for product development and research collaboration had become unstable without any obvious explanation. Victoria entered the operations center with calm determination, even as tension quietly spread across the room. Status, she asked. The chief technology officer took a slow breath before answering. The network is experiencing an unusual authentication conflict. Nothing appears damaged, but the recovery process is creating new permission errors every few minutes. Every automated solution creates another problem. Victoria looked around the room. Some of the brightest engineers in the country were already working together, yet no one appeared confident. She remained silent for several moments before asking a simple question. Has anyone looked at the recovery architecture instead of only the failure reports? The room grew still. One engineer admitted quietly, "We have been focused on stopping the symptoms." Victoria nodded thoughtfully, remembering another calm voice speaking almost the same philosophy only days before. Sometimes computers only need someone willing to slow down. She turned toward Grace. Please call Mr. Walker. Several executives exchanged surprised glances. One vice president leaned closer and spoke carefully. With respect, we have an entire cybersecurity division. Victoria answered without raising her voice. I know. I am asking for someone who solves problems without trying to impress anyone. Less than an hour later, Ethan arrived carrying the same worn leather toolbox that had followed him through years of honest work. He greeted the receptionist by name because she had offered him coffee during his previous visit. When he entered the operations center, dozens of anxious faces turned toward him. No one announced his arrival. No cameras followed him. He simply walked to an available workstation and listened while engineers explained everything they had already attempted. Ethan asked only a handful of questions before requesting temporary access to a test environment instead of the live system. If we keep making changes directly, he said gently, we will only create more uncertainty. The room became quiet. He worked without rushing, sketching a simple flowchart on a legal pad instead of covering digital whiteboards with complicated diagrams. Every adjustment was tested before being applied. Every decision had a reason that even junior engineers could understand. Hours passed beneath the steady glow of fluorescent lights while coffee cups slowly emptied across the conference tables. Then one small configuration change restored the authentication sequence exactly as it had functioned before the conflict began. One by one, system indicators shifted from warning colors to steady green. File access returned. Collaboration servers synchronized normally. The room released a collective breath that no one realized they had been holding. Applause began somewhere near the back of the operations center, but Ethan simply closed his notebook and stepped away from the keyboard. "Your team did the hard part," he said quietly. "They gathered every piece of the puzzle. I only helped arrange them." Several engineers looked at one another, surprised that someone who had solved the problem so elegantly refused to claim the spotlight. Victoria watched him in thoughtful silence. She had spent years meeting brilliant people, but genuine humility remained the rarest talent she had ever encountered. As Ethan packed his toolbox once again, he glanced at his watch and smiled softly. "If everything is stable now, I should leave. Lily has her school choir performance tonight, and she asked me to sit in the front row." No one tried to stop him. In that moment, every executive in the room quietly understood that the man walking toward the elevator measured success very differently than anyone else in the building, and somehow his definition felt far richer than all of theirs. 1 week later, the grand auditorium at Hayes Dynamics filled with employees from every department for the company's annual Innovation and Community Leadership celebration. Bright stage lights reflected against polished glass walls while conversations echoed through the room with quiet anticipation. Engineers, designers, executives, interns, and support staff took their seats expecting another presentation about future technology and business achievements. Instead, Victoria Hayes stood alone behind the podium, holding only a single sheet of paper that she never unfolded. Her expression was calm, yet something in her eyes had changed. There was less distance now, less perfection, and far more honesty. She looked across the audience before speaking. "Every year we celebrate innovation," she began. "Today, I would rather celebrate character." The room grew silent. A few weeks ago, one computer inside this company stopped working. Most people believed that was the problem. It was not. The real problem was that many of us, including me, had become so focused on achievement that we forgot what quiet integrity looks like. Curious whispers quickly faded as she continued. "The person who restored that computer also restored something I did not realize I had been losing." She paused briefly before smiling toward the side entrance. "Mr. Ethan Walker, would you please join me?" Hundreds of heads turned as Ethan entered wearing the same neatly pressed blue work shirt he wore every day. His old leather toolbox rested in one hand because he had come directly from another service appointment. He looked genuinely confused as polite applause spread across the auditorium. He reached the stage with the same quiet humility that had defined every encounter since the day they first met. Victoria faced him instead of the audience. "When you repair my laptop, you discovered something deeply personal that you could have used to embarrass me, impress others, or gain my attention." Ethan gently shook his head. "It was never mine to use." Victoria smiled, her voice becoming softer. "Exactly." She turned back toward the audience. "Many people have admired my success. Many have praised my company. But this man gave me something no award, investment, or headline ever could. He gave me the rare gift of feeling respected when I was at my most vulnerable." The auditorium became completely still. Victoria continued without looking away from Ethan. "He never mentioned what he saw. He never asked for favors. He never reminded me that he had solved problems my own experts could not. He simply protected my dignity because that is who he is." Ethan lowered his eyes, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "I only did my job," he said quietly. Victoria smiled again. "No, Mr. Walker, you did far more than your job. You reminded me that the strongest people are not always the loudest or the wealthiest. Sometimes they're the ones who quietly choose kindness when nobody is watching." She reached into a folder resting beside the podium and handed Ethan an envelope. "Inside is an offer to become our Director of Community Technology Education. You would help schools, libraries, and nonprofit organizations across Illinois gain access to technology and digital safety resources. The schedule is designed around families because I know there is one little girl who expects her father to keep showing up." Ethan opened the envelope slowly before looking back at Victoria. "I will need one condition." A few people smiled, wondering what he might request. "Every afternoon, I leave by 3 o'clock to pick up Lily from school. Gentle laughter filled the room before Victoria answered without hesitation. Then every afternoon this company will become a place that remembers why families matter. The applause grew louder, but Ethan remained quiet. At that moment, Lily ran onto the stage from the front row where Grace had secretly reserved a seat for her. She wrapped both arms around her father, and he lifted her into a warm embrace as naturally as breathing. Victoria watched them with peaceful eyes, realizing that the unanswered question she had once hidden inside a forgotten draft no longer carried the same weight. She finally understood that real beauty had never been something another person could confirm with words. It was revealed through quiet dignity, faithful love, and the courage to make someone else feel safe. As father and daughter walked toward the auditorium doors together, Victoria followed several steps behind, not because she wanted to lead them, but because she had finally found a direction worth following.